Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome back, everyone. If you haven't subscribed, please do so right now, as it'll help us get our show to others and help us reach our next milestone. Make sure to catch us streaming on Parade Deck, on Roku and Amazon Fire TV, on the Purpose Place Network, and catch our exclusive members-only content Going Deeper Within on the Lions Guide Academy. Today, we are speaking with Rashmi. Rashmi is a lawyer, international speaker, strategic change catalyst, serial entrepreneur, singer, and endurance athlete. What more can we fit in there? She doesn't just talk about resilience, she lives it. And after navigating a federal prison sentence, Rashmi now inspires leaders to harness vulnerability, face adversity head on, and embrace stronger through her Rise Through It framework. And I love it. And we'll be talking about that here in a little while. Rashmi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Enrique, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And we are excited to speak with you. And folks, we will be speaking about leading without compromise, ethical leadership, and redemption. But before we get into that conversation, Rashmi, tell us a little bit about you that maybe others may not know.
So I live in Miami, Florida. I am the mother of two college children. So all the fun that goes along with that, they are my pride and joy. They are definitely my why, along with helping others rise through struggle now. And my daughter's a college volleyball athlete, which is really fun. I am the daughter of Indian immigrants, first generation American, raised here in Miami, born in North Carolina, and have certainly, kind of traversed that experience of balancing two cultures and finally coming to the understanding over the last decade that my self-worth, my self-value, my self-love is not rooted in achievement, but rather in who I am as a human and how I impact others and touch their lives.
And I love that because I've often spoken about my duality being from Puerto Rico. And although we may be part of the U.S., it sure feels like sometimes we're not. And so we have to navigate, navigate those feelings throughout our time. I really am grateful to have this conversation with you, as I mentioned earlier, as a leadership developer and teacher and trainer. Ethics actually comes up a lot, and how to navigate those moments where that may be challenged, and the decisions that we make during that time and where they may lead us. And so I love your story. I love not the fact that you had to go through that, but that you're taking it and had it be a fuel for what you're doing now. Now, if leadership is a currency, what do you believe devalues it the fastest? And what are the gold standards, habits that restore its worth?
Yeah, so I feel like leadership traditionally has been a very dogmatic type of like experience. And so there was, I think, historically, this idea that to be a leader, you had to be arrogant and strong and tell people what to do and feel like you knew it all. And I think that that currency of leadership gets devalued actually by that. And I think as we as humans have evolved, there's certainly a deeper understanding that true leadership is actually when you come from a place of authenticity and a sense of understanding that we are all actually flawed humans, and that I, as a leader, if I'm running an organization, I might not know it all. And my strength lies in empowering the people around me to see their worth and help me grow and achieve whatever our organization's goals are or our team's goals. Um, you know, my journey has certainly taught me that I used to think that I had to know it all and that I had to keep this armor up and this aura of perfection, this aura of um, flawlessness. And as I took accountability for having made some really bad decisions, what I found is that is actually where the leadership lies, right? Like that's where people can shine and see themselves in me, and without actually like my intent when I took accountability for having made decisions that were really bad was really just to heal and to be honest and take ownership. The result was that people saw me as a leader and were able to see themselves in me, and it empowered them to be different in their at home, at work, you know, in their lives. And so all my work now, when I work with, you know, teams and organizations, whether it's through keynoting or my leadership workshops, it really is helping people come into their sense of purpose by recognizing who they are as humans. And I think that that's what continues to make us better leaders. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah, it does. And as you were speaking, I reflected on some of the points in my leadership journey where I felt like I really made a difference. And it was when I was able to say, hey, let's talk about why you were late, and not because why you were late, because I want to share a story of when I was late and how I overcame it. And then that stabilized the volatility in that conversation to, oh, this is a person that knows exactly where I am, and maybe we can work on this together, right? So vulnerability and authenticity obviously are the catalyst of you really making a difference as a leader. And I think that that's why you're so sought after, because people do see that. Now, we do have these opportunities to make decisions during our leadership time, some great, some not so great. So, what part of your personal redemption arc should be required learning for every emerging leader today? And why do you think it's often left out of leadership training?
well, I think we should go back a little bit because your listeners might not know my story. So let's help them understand at least why I'm in redemption mode. For those of you that don't know my story, I was by all accounts, the perfect little Indian girl growing up in Miami and did all the right things, right? I always colored between the lines and you know, never went off path. And I'm 54 now, and I have to date never tried a drug or tried a cigarette. Like I have just been very um straight and narrow. And I'm really the last person anybody thought would have ended up in prison. I went to a really good college, graduated top of my class, worked on Wall Street, went to a really good law school. And I'm only saying this not in any way to be boastful, but to just sort of set the stage for what happened, which is in 2004, I was introduced to a real estate developer. And at the time, I was a real estate attorney here in Miami running a solo practice. So I had four people that worked for me. I was a solopreneur. My husband at the time was a firefighter. We had, two very little children, and I felt all this like the need to not just make the client happy, but to make the money, to keep up with, have financial stability, to keep up with appearances. And Miami is no stranger to all of the sort of materialistic ideals that people put out there. And so I was caught in that. And so when I met this developer, I definitely believed that this was the answer to my financial struggles. Like, and not that I was trying to make like millions of dollars. It was more just like having financial stability and being able to spend more time with my kids versus hustling all the time. And because I was missing dinners, I was having marital problems, all these things. And so when I went to go meet the developer, without going into all the details, I recognize now that my stomach was screaming, my gut was screaming, something didn't feel right. And I just didn't listen. And versus asking the questions and listening to my gut, I just was so I needed this client so badly is what I convinced myself. And so I just turned a blind eye and started working with the client for about 15 months. And I was doing closings, so real estate transactions for your listeners, like when you buy a house, I was doing those closings. I made legal fees off of every closing, right? Title fees, nothing outside of that. 7 years later, I got indicted for bank fraud. And it was really, it was really the moment that the catalyst for me to uh, force myself to understand and acknowledge that I had done something wrong, that I had not, when I should have asked the right questions and when I should have listened to my gut and walked away, I just made assumptions and justified and rationalized and wanted to work with this guy so badly to have that financial stability for my children and my husband. And so ultimately, I pled guilty. I had a great attorney who helped me understand and recognize all of this. I was sentenced to a year and a day in prison, and I served about 6 months when my kids were 9 and 10. And so the redemption arc that you asked for me has been a journey. I got sentenced in a couple of weeks, it'll be 10 years ago. And what I realized is that redemption for me started when I first took accountability. So this was even before I got sentenced. So when I decided to plead guilty, I called literally 200 people in my life, people that knew me at my core, knew my history, and who I was as a human being. And I called and I told them, and remember, like, this is before I got sentenced, so I was super scared. I had no idea. I was living in uncertainty. I was really fearful. Like, I thought my whole life was over, right? This was everything I had worked so hard for. And so as I called people, the reason I called people was it was important for me to that people heard it from me, that they didn't gossip about it or read about it or hear about it. And so I wanted people to hear from me. And what I found was that every call I made was I healed a bit more. I took more and more accountability. And I was actually pretty convinced that everyone was going to hang up on me, right? Like no one's going to be my friend anymore because they only love me because I'm an achiever. This is what I had convinced myself of my whole life. And now I'm 46 and I'm calling people and telling them. And the greatest lesson for me in my redemption was that people love me for who I am as a human, not because of my achievements. And that I believe that when we hold ourselves accountable and come forward and be vulnerable and recognize that we're flawed humans, people love us even more. They respect us even more. And so that was the start of my redemption, is that like recognizing that. I believe my redemption arc has really started with accountability. I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive others in this case because my client was not indicted. People close to me that actually were the masterminds in this were not indicted. And for a long time, I was very angry about it because I was like, how is that fair? Why am I being taken away from my children when he was the mastermind, when he came up with this, when he made millions and millions of dollars and, you know, uh, until I forgave him. So I started with forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and then I forgave him. And I realized like we all go through these life journeys. And I spiritually believe that we all go through these struggles in our lives to grow and become better versions of ourselves. And this is just the journey that fate and the universe has led to me to grow and evolve. Um, I think my redemption arc has continued after I got back from, well, even when I was in prison, I spent a lot of energy and time reading, praying. Um, I would send a quote of the day. So you're allowed to have 30 people on your email list when you're in prison. And so to all 30 people, which were like friends and family and my kids and my attorney. And then I had one person who was on that list, one of my closest best friends, who agreed to be like the liaison. So there were like 200 other people that she would then forward the email to because I couldn't have that many people on my list. And every day I would send a quote of the day out. And it was like a quote that I would see either in a book that I had or a magazine or a journal. And I just would choose a quote that like really touched me that day. And at like noon every day, After lunch, I would send a quote of the day out to these 30 people, which then was forwarded to others, and I would give my sort of take on it. And that process of like just reflecting every day of how I was doing while I was in prison was really life changing. Not just for me, but I also believe for the people on the outside. And then, of course, since I've come home, I've done so much research on not just behavioral ethics and psychological safety, but also just leadership and and lately resilience. And I work now with organizations on how do you measure resilience growth in your teams, and then how do you focus in on those factors that would help them grow in resilience and help them adapt better, when there's struggle and challenging times. So it's certainly been a 10-year journey of and I every time I step onto stage or am asked to lead a workshop, I heal just a bit more. And I feel like I continue in that redemption journey for myself.
Oh, wonderful. And I hope this episode continues to help you heal. And
Yeah.
as I'm listening, it's something that, hey, it took us all of our life to get to a certain point. We
Yeah.
made a decision. It may take all of the rest of our life to get to the other side of what redemption would have for us.
Yeah. And I believe we all are capable of finding redemption if we allow ourselves to, be vulnerable enough and be open enough to go through that hard process, because it's not easy. It certainly, for me, has been a process of understanding who I am. And I know that, like, for my children and for my parents, like, I'm very much somebody who's always reminding them to be honest with themselves. And, sometimes my kids who are 19 and 20, don't want to hear it. And so I have to keep just kind of being in their face about it.
And that's fine. We have our role and responsibility as parents that we have to execute, and they'll thank us later on. But if there are future leaders listening, if the future leaders of tomorrow could inherit only
Yeah.
one of your failures as their lessons and live it without consequence, which one would you gift them and why?
I think the failure that I experienced was when I was faced with this like life-changing moment where I was so focused on chasing the goal and the client and the money, I wished I would have listened to my inner voice, right? And recognize that it's not just about that. It's about like honoring our core values. Like, I had a set of core values and I just stopped. I was not in alignment with my values. And that's how I went so off path. And so a lot of the leadership training that I do now is focused on like first recognizing what are our core values, and then aligning with those core values and making sure we're always making sure those values are actionable, right? That we're always living in those values, no matter what the stresses, pressures, influences, competition is out there. And that's the struggle, I think, as leaders, is to make sure nothing sways us, right? Like, that's the biggest lesson. If we're going to look at like my story, right? And then the other part of it is just the understanding that whatever struggle we are faced with in our lives, which we all look, I believe it is the universal truth that we will all struggle. It's not if, it's when, right? And struggle just looks differently for all of us. For me, it happens to be this really crazy legal challenge, right? And my story is mine. Yours is yours. Everybody has their own story. And nobody that's listening is going to ever have to be faced with what I went through. But we will all go through something: legal, medical, financial, marital, mental health, something with our kids, or change, uncertainty, AI anxiety, disruption, right? Like, there's so much going on in our lives, market volatility. There are so many struggles that we all are facing every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. And so the recognition that struggle is not here to be a detour from what we're supposed to do in our lives. It's actually a doorway into something that we might not even recognize yet. And that understanding, whether you want to call it a failure for people to learn from, just the understanding that, like, I was so stuck thinking that like, how will I ever come back from this? Like, who will love me? My life is over, right? That for me has transformed into, wow, I had to lose my freedom to gain the complete freedom and understanding that every single thing is a doorway for me to become a better version of myself, to grow. And I believe that's the purpose of our human existence. And so it's not about the money we're making. It's not about our, notoriety and fame, right? I really truly believe is how can we become better versions of ourselves and impact others in a positive way?
I believe that as well. So great share there. And I hope that the young up and coming leaders are listening and take that to heart. Now, you've
Totally.
spoken about ethical fading. How should future leaders design environments that make it hard to be unethical, even under pressure?
Yeah, I believe that one of the biggest challenges as young professionals is the the recognition that we have blind spots, right? That we have these areas that we might not want to look at about ourselves or about our organizations or about our teams. And so it's easier just to like keep in status quo and keep pursuing the goal. And there's lots of different concepts. I can talk about a few of them that I have focused on in the past. One is overconfidence bias. So overconfidence bias is this idea that I'm a good person. I want to do X, so X must be good. And what happens is when you convince yourself that you're such a good person that you would never do anything wrong. So whatever you decide you choose that you're going to do is obviously good. You lack any sense of moral judgment because you're just not even applying any moral judgment. You're just going along with the flow and you're doing in rapid pace because we live in a fast-paced society. We live running around the race course of life, trying to continue to get things done, mark things off our list. And so if you're not recognizing that you're stuck in overconfidence bias, because we all believe we're good people, right? And so I never believed I could have done anything wrong. And that was part of my trap. The other concept that I never knew of is moral humility. So we all know what humility is, right? Humility is the recognition that, I'm on equal plane with everybody else in the world and not to be arrogant and to understand that I have always something to learn. And, so that's humility. Moral humility is the understanding that on any given day, I could make a bad moral decision if or given the stressors, influences, pressures, competition, other things in my life. If we live in a sense that I could never do anything wrong, I would never do anything wrong, we lack moral humility. And when we don't have that level of moral humility, again, we don't have moral judgment about the things that we're doing. So it all goes together, right? Living in our core values, having moral humility, recognizing where our biases are so that we don't get trapped in our blind spots. But rather when those moments come up, we take the time to pause and actually reflect on what are our values. Am I making a good moral decision, right? Where am I on the ethical line? Where am I in the decision-making process so that we then do make the right decision versus the wrong one?
And a very powerful distinction between that humility, because you're right. We know the basics of humility, but then you do need to ask a little further down the road so that you don't fall into those traps. And I hope that the listeners are recognizing that difference and hopefully apply it in the future to whatever they have to do. Now, what question do you wish someone would have asked you before you crossed your ethical boundary, and how might answering it have changed your trajectory?
What I wish somebody would have asked me to do is to get a second opinion, uh, to ask for help, to not live in a silo and believe I knew what I was doing. And so as a solopreneur, there was a lot of things trapped in that, right? There was a lot of pride and ego. Um, I'm the oldest of three daughters, and so I kind of grew up believing that I knew it all. And like I can't ask for help because I'm the oldest. Like I'm supposed to know it all. And then on top of that, people think attorneys are supposed to know it all. And by the way, I'm like surrounded by attorneys. My parents are attorneys, my mentors, many of my friends. There's any number of people I could have gone to get a second opinion. But I was so trapped in this idea that I needed this client. I had to get this client. I need to work with this client. I need to make the money from this client that I didn't even allow myself the freedom to go ask for help or for a second opinion. And it's very easy for us to get caught up in that because we, in this case, I wanted the client. I wanted the financial stability that would arrive from the client. And that is such a trap, right? So I wish, I guess the question you asked me, what would the question be? I mean, I think the question would be, I need help. Or can you examine what I'm about to do and tell me honestly and truthfully, should I do this or not? Right. I wish I could have gone back and done that.
Yeah, and it's so important to, like you mentioned, solopreneur, right? Solopreneurs, that's what they call it, solo, right? You're on your own.
Yeah.
You're trying to make the best decisions for this business and enterprise that you created. And when you already have a set goal, you tend to put all your, you know, your
Eggs
your
in the basket.
steps in there to
Yeah.
go towards that, and you convince yourself that that is the right way to go. And had there been, in my instance, had there been that one person that says, Enrique, are you sure that you want to do this? I would have probably thought about it and said, that's probably not in my best interest.
Right.
Right?
Right. And I think what happens is when we're about to do something that we're maybe our guts questioning, that's exactly when we don't ask people because we're trying to shut down any sort of semblance of questioning. And that is like the biggest red flag that we need to be paying attention to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you have so much that we can glean from in this story, and I'm sure that you have future things coming up. So, what do you have coming up, and
Yeah.
where can the viewer or the listener follow you and support you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, I'm super excited to launch my book soon. So, I have been working on it for many years, on and off. It's definitely now the right time. It'll likely launch in early 2026. The title of the book is All Rise, A Lawyer's Journey from Prison to Purpose. And it's being published by Amplify Publishing Company. So, I'm super excited about that coming out. Pre-launch will probably be in the fall, so definitely look out for that. And please order a pre-launch, order a book because that helps me, of course. Um, I am definitely deep in growing my speaking business and working with speaker bureau agents, and so that's really exciting. And I have a incredible business manager, office manager who's helping me. And yeah, I'm just excited to be mothering and doing all the things that it takes. I'm about to move two children into a dorm and a house coming up in a few weeks, and I have an exciting fall ahead. So yeah, a lot of big things ahead. There is a documentary series also in the works. I'm launching a podcast in the fall. So yeah, there's a lot of things happening. Let's see, my website is my name, so www.rashmiairan.com. On all the socials, well, I'm not on X, but LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, it's Rashmi Airan. So pretty easy to find.
Yeah, folks, we'll have all the links necessary to have you be able to connect and support Rashmi and all that she has coming up. And definitely we'll have the link to any future your book and any future things that will be on there as well. And we'll update it so they can get a hold of it. Folks, today's episode is sponsored by the Global Trends Magazine, The Outlier Project, Fantail Services, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, Ascend Meditations, and Chop AI. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know by leaving a comment. Tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.